Hello everyone, Jason here. Lately I've felt a little bit nostalgic, and in that I've been thinking about when I first started on this health journey. Remembering just I remember I started getting sick more often. I wasn't used to that. And when you go to the doctor doesn't know. I would ask these questions and it's like, wow, if they can't answer these questions, then something's not right here. And then looking at my parents, I remember my dad taking a pill and that pill caused a side effect. Then he had to take another pill to take care of that side effect. And I'm just like, oh my. It's almost like, I call it this matrix of craziness we're in. We're all busy and I'm guilty of this. We have our cell phones. We're always looking, what's the next text? And then we come home, we watch TV, we go to the sports game, and just constantly our lives have become just crazy. That's all I can say. And because of that, we've lost the practicality of the past. And that's really why when I was thinking of the past, I went to my bookshelf and I picked up this book. This is a book, it was written in 1976, You Can Master Disease by Bernard Jensen. Bernard Jensen, he's passed away, and not for sure, I don't have anything to do with that organization, so I don't even know where they're at. I don't even know if this has been reprinted. This one copy was printed, I believe, in 1976. And so, some of it is dated. But then again, I thought about, what better thing for now, especially in the craziness of nowadays, to just go back and get grounded in some of the key concepts. And so I thought I would read this to my audience, and not everything, but read through it and stop and talk about, what things have changed, what updates we've had since this book was written. So then again, this is You Can Master Disease by Bernard Jensen. The first chapter is Starvation in the Midst of Plenty. That's a loaded title. Starvation in the Midst of Plenty. He starts off with a little excerpt here. The United States Government, Department of Agriculture. Doesn't give a date, but this is what the United States government stated in the past. Living under conditions of modern life, it is important to bear in mind that the preparation and refinement of food products either entirely eliminates or in part destroys the vital elements in the original material. I mean, that's huge. Basically, this is saying that the food we're eating is lifeless. It's empty. It's devoid of minerals, vitamins, enzymes, all the good stuff that we need. Basically, they're saying it here. And this was back, this book was written in 1976, so who knows when this quote was written. I'm like, wow. So to start off, his first part here is called The Necessity for Minerals and Vitamins. I'm not going to read everything, but I'll read certain sections. Man has had many changes in his living, but one thing is certain. The kind of air man needs to keep him alive today is the same kind of air man needed 1,000 or 10,000 years ago. True. We need sunshine today just as we needed it yesterday. And the requirements of the body for certain elements of minerals and vitamins which come through plant life from the soil is just about the same. In order to get these required mineral and vitamin elements from our foods must not only be properly prepared, but properly grown. The soil must be rich with vital elements. And I can completely relate with this. I grew up on a farm. I remember going over to my grandmother's house. She was just a couple of miles away from where I was with my parents out in the country. She had a beautiful garden, a big garden. She would take care of that garden. She had mulch. She would have my grandfather go out and catch a bunch of fish, and then he would put the fish throughout the garden and as fertilizer. I remember playing in the garden, and you could just feel the soil was alive. It was full of bacteria, bugs, organisms, and had lots of earthworms. Remember, loved playing with the earthworms. And after it would rain, the whole garden just had tons of earthworms coming up. And then I would walk across the dirt road, go into the neighbor's cornfield, and the soil was dry. It was really hard and compact. And I remember digging into it one day. It was like lifeless. There's no earthworms in it. And I even had a shovel out there one day, and I was just digging away. And no earthworms. And it's just like, wow, this is really, really different from my grandmother's soil to what they're producing for cattle and for human usage, but on an industrial scale. And I do remember going by the canisters of chemicals, whether they were the fertilizers or the pesticides. I remember as a child, I always got like nauseous when I went by those big barrel canisters. And just think about it, since what, the early 1940s on, maybe the 1930s, we've been spraying all these chemicals on our land. And it's killing the whole ecosystem within our soil, the bacteria, the worms. And without this ecosystem that's alive going on, I don't know how many people really think through this, but without that bacteria and the earthworms constantly breaking down and working with the soil, creating that topsoil, that's what makes the minerals easily assimilated by the plants. When you get rid of the bacteria and the earthworms, the soil's dead. And the plants cannot, there's minerals in the soil, but they're not available. Just they're in a form that's not available for the plants to take in. Continuing. Men could live a good deal longer and in better health if he realized that through mineralization, he could prevent a lot of the sicknesses he has today. And that's a huge statement. And he does go in here with a few things. We'll get to those. So before that, he goes on and says, mineral requirements vary with individuals and with conditions. I think this is so important. A lot of times they say, oh, you should take 200 milligrams of this. And, it depends on the person. For instance, I'm sedentary. I sit at a desk all day long at my job. Whereas some of the people where I work, they work in the warehouse. They're constantly running around. They're picking up boxes. They're getting lots of physical activities. So it makes sense that they would need different minerals and vitamins than what I would need. He continues here. The slow-working man needs a different chemical balance from that of the fast-working man. The mental student needs organized phosphorus in his diet. The mental worker who uses his eyes a lot needs selenium. Well, that would be me, because I sit at a desk and I'm using my mind constantly. I analyze data. So I need selenium. The man who must make many decisions needs phosphorus and sulfur. The man who talks a lot needs phosphorus and iodine. And he goes on here. Manganese, one of the mineral elements of the earth, is called the mother love element. When animals are deprived of it, they refuse to nurse their young. Wow, that's huge. Many human mothers today are not nursing their young. Remember, this is published in 1976. Things are changing now. Let's continue. Many human mothers today are not nursing their young. They should. I believe that doctors deprive a mother of one of her greatest joys by not urging her to experience this expression of mother love for her child. I mean, that's so true. And also another huge thing that this is missing here is a child needs that mother's milk, not only because of the nutrients in it, and hopefully the mother has a good diet so she can pass on those nutrients to her child that the child needs, but also the mother is passing on her bacteria, her good bacteria. Hopefully she has good flora to pass on that good flora to her child. Malnutrition is a fundamental factor in all disease. And this holds true whether it be in animal life, human life, or plant life. It is lamentable that doctors have not recognized sooner the deficiency signs of certain elements in the body. And I think that's even more true nowadays. Some people go around for years with ailments because of a lack of this knowledge. And he goes further into some of the conditions. And let me just go on here. Many doctors feed their patients an excess of calcium, thinking they're supplying the body with the principal element it lacks. Without a proper balance of other elements such as sodium, iodine, and phosphorus, an excess of calcium will make the body hard. They even make the mistake of feeding the specific element the body needs in a synthetic form. I mean, this is right on the synthetic form. So many people are buying multivitamin and mineral supplements, but they're synthetic. So basically, you're paying for something you're taking is doing no good. In fact, I've seen studies where a lot of these synthetic minerals are actually doing harm to our body. And then he talks about calcium. Again, on Blog Talk Radio. And he does talk about the importance of vitamin D. So they begin to understand the importance of vitamin D if you're taking calcium. Basically, if you have enough calcium in your diet, if you're deficient in vitamin D, then your body can't absorb calcium. So I personally take vitamin D3 supplement because I always don't get the sun I need for my body to create vitamin D. So I take a vitamin D3 supplement, but also along with K2, and specifically the MK7 K2 form. And that form allows your body then to put the calcium where it needs to be put. For instance, if you're taking calcium and you have plenty of calcium, you're drinking kefir, you're eating yogurt, etc. You probably don't need to take a calcium supplement. It just isn't needed nowadays if you're eating dairy and also kale, etc. But along with that, if you're deficient in vitamin D, then your body isn't able to absorb that calcium. So if you're taking a vitamin D3 supplement, or if you live in Florida, you're getting out in the sun every day and you have your vitamin D, that's great. But if you're deficient in K2, then your body's just dumping, it's absorbing the calcium, but it's dumping it anywhere in your body, in your brain, in your arteries, heart disease, in your brain, strokes. It's just amazing how little we're really thinking through and putting this all together and understanding that each one of us is unique, but underneath, within that uniqueness, there's just the practicality of certain that we've lost that we had in the past. Let's continue with when synthetic elements of any kind are taken into the body, they cannot be properly eliminated if not used and become irritants. Giving the patient an excess of synthetic calcium may cause arthritis and other conditions. Calcium can be used to dissolve the deposits in arthritis, but it must be combined with phosphate to help eliminate the dissolved materials. And he goes on here. Some of this is outdated, but definitely he's right on in that we need fruits and vegetables that are grown with healthy soil. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, calcium is essential in poultry diet for the maintenance of the hatchability of eggs. Calcium affects the thickness of the shells and the resistance to breakage. Makes sense. A chicken can draw on her skeleton for enough calcium to make shells for only 3 or 4 eggs. A hen that lays 200 eggs per year puts into those eggs many times more calcium than she has in her body. So she must be given the proper calcium replacement. On poultry farms in Petaluma, California, chickens are fed green kale, which is high in calcium, so that the eggs will have a hard shell. I mean, isn't this amazing? We're feeding our animals, in this case, well, at least back in those days, they were feeding their chicken kale. Why aren't we doing that with the humans? Interesting question. All day long, we must use the brain in making decisions. We use our muscles and the digestive, nervous, and glandular systems, and the mineral elements we consume must be replaced. Just as calcium-deficient hens lay soft-shelled eggs, so we develop many soft people from the lack of certain minerals. We are truly children of the soil, and we need everything that is in it, or should be in it. Arthur Brisbane once wrote in his column that we are becoming a people who eat a lot, but we have stomachs filled with foodless foods. I would actually change that and say empty foods. And even that's hit the organic industry. When I first began in the organic industry, I remember everything tasted you could tell the difference between conventional and organic. You could tell they were full of minerals and vitamins, and they had the taste was just incredible. Over the years, 20, 30 years, I've noticed like carrots nowadays from California that are industrial produced, they taste horrible. They taste like cardboard. In fact, I spit them out. And I'm so fortunate, I live now in an area where there are local farmers everywhere, and a lot of them grow organically. And the vegetables that are growing here, wow. You can just tell it. They have the same taste and flavor that I remember 35 years ago. I can give an example of where I was a produce manager when my first job, when I got out of college, well, my second job. I was a produce manager, and I took it on myself at a health food store, and I took it on myself to try to get almost my whole entire vegetable section so it was locally grown during the summertime, and I succeeded for certain weeks. It was just like, wow, it's like I had daikon, I had kale, had turnips, everything. I even had fennel, I had burdock, I had all these things that were locally grown. It was a great job to have. I remember one of the farmers I'd go to, he said, "Where are you buying your winter squash?" And I go, "Well, from this farm over, about 20 miles down the road." And he goes, he said, he just started going on. And you know what? He's right. That was the farm I was getting my winter squash from. They were a big conventional, so they were industrial farming, conventional farm that had converted some of their acreage over to organic. And so he had issues about the drift, as they sprayed their one fields, and I agree with him, as they sprayed the fields, that would drift over on the organic fields. But what I was more concerned about is that he didn't catch on to, they didn't take care of the soil. And that's what's really what's happened, like I've said earlier, is that they may be, quote, organic, but they're empty organic. And what I mean by empty organic is because even though they may be growing them organically, they're cutting corners. They're not taking care of the soil. And because they're not taking care of the soil does not have the mineral availability that the plants can then take up. And because of that, the plants have less and less nutrients in them year over year. And that's why it's so important, this regenerative agriculture that's becoming big right now. I hope that really takes off and it's not taken over again by the big industrial farming practices, because we got to get our food supply back to where it has those vital nutrients, because that's how we stay healthy and vibrant throughout our long life. Let's continue with another paragraph here. No nation can afford to have a large segment of its population among the underfed and misfed. Not only must we produce more food, but more people must know how to select a good diet and be willing to eat what they should. And that's easier said than done. I agree with him. Then again, it's more difficult to put into practice. And speaking of a diet for the average person, enough experimental work has been done on animals to prove that we can produce stomach ulcers and other maladies through improper feeding methods. Man today is repeating the same mistakes over and over again. We must learn how to correct these maladies through proper feeding and other right living habits. Ulcers of the stomach have been cleared up by many natural means. One of the newest therapies being the use of cabbage juice. I remember this. I was like, yuck, but it works. Some medical men found that cabbage juice would cure gastric ulcers, but these were remedied by diet procedures long before the use of cabbage juice became popular. I say that it is good therapy to recognize what food can do in any of our disease conditions. Many diseases we are handling with so many systems of treatment today could truly be handled better if we realized that basically we are lacking certain mineral elements. He's right on. And then this statement is huge. Irritability and emotional disturbances can result from a mineral imbalance. I'm going to read that again. Irritability and emotional disturbances can result from a mineral imbalance. All the diseases such as arthritis, neuritis, rheumatism are from acids that are caused by lack of sodium. Certain fruits and vegetables supply this element plentifully when grown on soil rich in sodium. We can be fed into a disease, and we can be fed out of it through remineralization. Teachers in the nutrition laboratory of Colorado State College conducted an experiment with white rats by feeding them a mixture of what was just about typical of the average college co-ed's diet. It consisted of chocolate cake, candy, pickles, and soft drinks. I haven't eaten any of those in a long time. Well, I've eaten pickles, but cake, candy, and soft drinks are definitely out of my diet. Let's continue. These foods were ground together and dried, and then fed, and when fed to the rats, they began to degenerate. After 3 weeks, they had lost most of their hair, had turned yellow, and in general showed that they were on their way toward death from lack of proper food. Experiments like this certainly should arouse the interest of every parent who is permitting children to ruin their health with such products. I was once called to the bedside of a Hollywood man who was suffering with 90 boils on his body. Before I began my consultation, he insisted upon telling me all about the prizes he had won with his ducks. I was quite interested to know how he got the prizes, so I listened to his story. He said he had a secret way of feeding his ducks. The secret, he divulged, was that he fed them potato peelings. When I got around to discussing his own health with him, I discovered that, not wanting to throw away the inside of the potatoes, he had been eating this acid-producing portion of the potato, in other words, the insides, not the peelings, because he fed those to the ducks. So let's read that again. I discovered that, not wanting to throw away the insides of the potatoes, he had been eating this acid-producing portion of the potato himself and feeding the alkaline portion to his ducks. While his ducks were getting the prizes, in other words, the best of the food, part of the potato, the peelings, he was getting the boils. We put him on a special diet of potato peeling broth to cure his extreme acid condition, which was boils on his body. Jails and insane asylums are full of ferocious people who have been improperly fed. I mean, that's huge. That's a huge statement. Highway accidents are often caused by colorblind drivers whose eyesight has been impaired by lack of proper mineral elements. Wow. Accidents are also caused by lack of proper muscular control. which may be due to an improper chemical balance of the body. Insurance companies would do well to investigate this and to spend their extra money in soil development. How true. They would be able to collect more on premiums and at the same time keep people alive and in good health longer if they would assist in keeping people well rather than waiting for them to die. So true. Most of us cannot think correctly. Our alertness is gone. Our decisive abilities have been lowered, and vitality and strength are constantly being taken away from us by the malnutrition problem which exists. I believe that one of the causes of wars is malnutrition. If minor quarrels can be handled by remineralization, we should consider this in connection with the major quarrels to be settled at the peace table. Processed and refined foods. It's the next section. With new discoveries being constantly made, refining and processing for the preservation of perishable food seems to be ever in the increase. In the processing and refining of wheat, for example, the vital life elements are removed or destroyed. This leaves only the starchy part of the wheat, void of the minerals and vitamins needed for healthful body functions, such as proper heart function, bowel regularity, etc. Our degree of health is dependent upon the amount of life in the food we eat. Oh, I love this. Our degree of health is dependent upon the amount of life in the food we eat. Refined and demineralized products are void of the proper vitamin and mineral content. Then it goes on here, and then he goes back into his experiments on rats and even birds. And then he goes into cooking methods. This is the next thing. So the first issue is our food has been devitalized. So that's the first issue. And you can imagine this was done this book was published in the 1970s. And so these tests on food was probably done in the 1950s and 60s, or maybe early 70s. And so you can imagine since then it's even got worse. So let's see what happens with cooking methods. Natural vitamins and minerals in vegetables can be best prepared by cooking without added water. The next best method is to cook in a pressure cooker or in a tightly covered pan with 1/2 cup of water. The poorest method is to cook with water to cover. And experiments show that vegetables cooked without water, when compared with those cooked with water to cover, retain 28% more vitamin B1, 32% more niacin, 20% more vitamin C, and 13% more iron. Following are some authoritative opinions regarding cooking methods. I'm going to read one of these. Let's see. Dr. Chase H. Mayo. I wonder if this is doctor of the Mayo clinics that are around nowadays. Here's his quote. The average housewife peels her vegetables, thus throwing away the part directly underneath the skins containing the most plentiful amount of mineral salts. Then the remaining portion is boiled, and the water, which has dissolved out more minerals, is thrown away. I mean, that's huge. Let's read one more. Dr. Percy E. Howe. He works at a dental infirmary at Boston, Massachusetts. The individual can affect his tooth substance by his diet, even after he has reached adult life. Decay of teeth is a disease solely of civilization. Whether a savage lives on fruit and vegetables in the tropics or raw meat in the Arctic zone, his teeth do not decay because he doesn't eat devitalized foods. I mean, that is huge. I've seen studies on that with natives, whether it's in the Amazon or in the Arctic, how they have perfect teeth. The U.S. government bulletin number 43 says this: in all foods, average losses by boiling are, so if you boil foods, you have a 48% reduction in iron, a 32% reduction in calcium, a 46% reduction in phosphorus, almost a 45% reduction in magnesium. Yeah, it's amazing. As you go through here, yeah, some more here, but I'll skip those. So his next section is titled, under chapter 1, his next section is titled, Life is Rooted in the Soil. You may get to what I was talking about earlier. Do you know that most of us today are suffering from certain dangerous diet deficiencies which cannot be remedied until the depleted soils are brought into proper mineral balance? The alarming fact is that foods, fruits and vegetables and grains now being raised on millions of acres of land that no longer contains enough of certain needed minerals are starving us no matter how much of them we eat. And this is a quote, but I just read. It came from a U.S. government document. I mean, wow, numbers 264, whatever that means. Dr. Alexis Carrel, one of the foremost scientists of the 20th century, says in his book, Man the Unknown, man is literally made from the dust of the earth. For this reason, his physiological and mental activities are profoundly influenced by the geological constitution of the country where he lives, by the nature of the animals and plants on which he generally feeds. His structure and his functions depend also on the selections he makes of certain elements among the vegetable and animal foods at his disposal. This is a quote. Man is first of all a nutritive process. The staple foods may not contain the same nutritive substances as in former times. Mass production has modified the composition of wheat, eggs, milk, fruit, and butter. Although these articles have retained their familiar appearance, chemical fertilizers, by increasing the abundance of crops without replacing all the exhausted elements of the soil, have indirectly contributed to change the nutritive value of cereal grains and vegetables. Hens have been compelled by artificial diet to enter the ranks of mass producers. Has not the quality of their eggs been modified? The same question may be asked about milk, because cows are now confined to the stable all year round and are fed on manufactured provender. And this is so true. The company I work with, it's an organic dairy. They've done studies on this, on how the organic milk, where the cows are allowed to be out in pasture as much as possible, depending upon the season. You can either be out for, well, it depends on where you're at. If you're in Florida, you can be out on the grass all year long. But here in Wisconsin, there's a certain season where you can be out eating green grass. And what they found is that there's a significant increase in the levels of the good omega-3s in that milk, as well as other benefits. And also the cows just overall are healthier. And from my perspective, if an animal is healthy and feels good, they're going to put that into their milk. Our first step to mineral starvation is depletion of our soil. Man will realize one of these days that he is not only changing soil conditions, but he is changing weather conditions by altering the plant life on the face of this earth. Wherever man has taken away trees and plants and put up homes and factories, he has cheated himself out of the life-giving properties that only plants and green leaves can give him. Disease is always found where there are no green leaves to give off oxygen and utilize the carbon dioxide waste which man gives off from his lungs. Plant life, and this is so true if you live in a city where you have smog, more pollution, the oxygen level is not as great. That's one reason why, for those of you who listen to my blog talk radio on hyperbaric oxygen therapy, why abbreviated as the HBOT, why that is so important nowadays, for not for oxygen, for so many other illnesses. Wherever man has taken, let's go back to, disease is always found where there are no green leaves to give off oxygen and utilize the carbon dioxide waste which man gives off from his lungs. Plant life is necessary to maintain the balance of the air. Man uproots plants and covers the earth with cement and then wonders why he has smog. A goodly portion of the smog is thrown off by his own lungs and cannot be reconverted into oxygen for him without the help of plant life. When we upset weather conditions, we cause drought. Under normal conditions, nitrogen is formed in the atmosphere and falls to the earth with rain when there is lightning. This nitrogen is much more beneficial to plant life than nitrogen added artificially to the soil. And I've even seen that. I remember I was driving with my dad one day. We were driving down the countryside, and I looked at one of our fields, and all the corn plants had turned brown. I said, Dad, what? I mean, we just went by here yesterday. Everything was green. Why is it brown? I always said we put too much fertilizer on it and it burned it. And I'm going, okay, so you're putting this fertilizer on that it makes me sick and nauseous anyway when I walk by the dumpsters. But when you put too much on the plants, it actually kills the plants. And I'm just like, there's something not right about this whole picture. People go to different parts of the country for their health. It has been found that pine belts are beneficial, especially for persons with bronchial or asthmatic disorders. They absorb certain healing properties given off by the trees. Ozone, which Hindu lore calls prana, and which is the life-giving property of air, is stored in the needles of the pine tree. And I go back to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It's amazing what that therapy can do for us. People who have slight ailments in other parts of the body need oxygen and ozone as much as the asthmatic or the bronchial case. It is a wonder we live as long as we do when we consider how fast we are destroying ourselves through the pollution of the air. Not only the pollution of the air, but our plants are devoid of nutrients. So he goes on here about all of this. He's getting a little bit off the subject where I want to go today, but I'm in agreement with him on the importance of nature and getting out in nature. I think that's part of our overall health. I believe the dulse of the Atlantic coast is very rich in minerals our bodies need, and that we should give this great consideration, especially when we learn that in one day, May 11, 1934, that was the Dust Bowl probably, a black cloud containing 300 million tons of topsoil moved into the Atlantic Ocean. This cloud contained many trace minerals and iodine, iron, phosphorus, and calcium, the minerals we need for building good bodies. In one day, 3,100 acre farms had their topsoil removed, thus preventing the growth of vitamin mineral-rich plants. Parts of the country which are very deficient in iodine are called iodine belts. There are also other water-soluble minerals that can be carried away when there has not been proper water conservation, etc. The soil may become short of calcium and be called calcium poor, or may be lacking in iron and be iron poor. Some plants take up more calcium than iron from the soil, and this is one reason why crops should be rotated. Some plant life should always be restored to the soil. Decayed plant life, or humus, provides a proper medium for the development of bacteria and is a necessary part of any soil program. He's touching on bacteria here, and he's right on how you need to have live, living soil. One of the best efforts being made to educate the public in soil conservation today is by the petroleum company that distributes 66 gasoline through the East. I think we'll pass this part, because it's actually the gas companies who are making the synthetic fertilizers, which are then destroying our land. Neither humans nor animals can get these minerals so necessary to health unless they are present in the plants used for food. They cannot be obtained satisfactorily from chemical sources, and in order for plants to bring these to the diet, they must be present in the soil. And this is huge. That's why when I feel like I do need to take a supplement, I take a food-based mineral and vitamin supplement that's food-based, and so I know that that my body recognizes it and can assimilate it in my body. In the last 10 years, sales of celery in the United States have increased to over 200 tons, lettuce 700,000 tons. He goes on here. Comparative increases have been made in the sales of citrus fruits. All of these are highly recommended by doctors as providers of minerals and vitamins. If grown on mineral-rich soil, they contain copper, chromium, iron, vanadium, sodium, magnesium, manganese, calcium, silicon, sulfur. How often are these foods, both canned and fresh, watery and tasteless, and far from the balanced products expected and paid for due to a deficiency of the vital elements in the soil in which they were grown? There is one thing certain. We must have soil that is not depleted but is rich in vital minerals. We must look to Mother Earth for the natural foods which were here before man was brought into this world. And I would even say, on the mineral-rich elements that he talks about in the soil. And I also would add that it needs to be a soil that is alive, that it contains the earthworms, the bacteria, and all the microorganisms that are basically breaking down the nutrients in the soil to make them then available for the plants to take up. We must look to Mother Earth for the natural foods we were here before man was brought into this world. The food that comes from Mother Earth was prescribed for us by the great physician, that's in capital letters. Before we were, just as our body and its different systems were prescribed for the foods. The food was made for us, and we were made for the food. We are inseparably connected with a life force that keeps us alive. Truly, we are the dust of the earth. That dust is made up of many elements and different properties that go to make a healthy or a diseased plant. When man lays hold of the natural things that took so many years to grow and so many years to produce, he destroys them in a matter of moments. Mechanized farming is ruining a lot of the topsoil today because it forces the crops to take everything possible from the soil while very little is being returned to it. According to soil experts, in the 20 years following 1914, more topsoil was ruined than in the whole previous historical period. This is something to think about. And just think about this was back from 1914. I'm just like, well, the 20 years following 1914, so 1914 to 1934. I mean, just think what's happened from then to now. It is recorded that at one time, men were as tall as cedars and as strong as oaks. There are only a few places on the earth today where man lives a simple, natural life and maintains healthy, hardy body. And I can tell that when I come from Colorado, and my brother was the firstborn. He was more stockier, and then I'm more skinny. I'm thinner boned, and I've noticed that as we've gone through. When I look at my pictures of my relatives, they're short and stocky, and you can just see they're healthy. They're vibrant. They just look like they have vitality. And, I see that in the younger generation, they don't have that anymore. And even when I moved out here to Wisconsin, actually out here, they're still connected with the farm. And they have really high mineral soil here, probably because of during the Ice Age with when the glaciers moved through this area. I'm sure that it really made the soil really rich here. And, a lot of them still drink well water, which is full of minerals. So you can see here just the people, they're more stocky and just they have more vitality to them than what I see in other areas of the country, especially people who grew up in a city. It is recorded that at one time men were as tall as cedars and as strong as oaks. There are only a few places on the earth today where man lives a simple, natural life and maintains a healthy, hardy body. The Hunsas of Indochina are one of the few peoples left of the tall as cedars and strong as oaks races of men. There is much to be learned from primitive farmers such as they. Everything they grow which cannot be used is returned to the soil. They even see to it that the bodies of deceased humans go into the soil. They live to the ripe old age of 100 to 125. Also, in many parts of India, where whatever is grown, whatever dies, is placed in a large pit to disintegrate. Then it is fed to the soil. Nature provides abundantly, but her gifts should be returned by those who benefit. In Switzerland, they use the urine and manure from their stables to spread over their land, as it contains many mineral elements. Everything they take out, they put back into the land. The straw and the feed from the barn is put into the soil in the form of humus. And their crops are beautiful, and we can truly say that they are good organic farmers. There was a day when natural composting took place. The leaves and various plant growths became part of the topsoils again. Soil is like a bank. You can draw from it, but not continually without leaving an exhausted condition. Wow. I'm going to read that again. Soil is like a bank. You can draw from it, but not continually without leaving an exhausted condition. Today, particularly in the so-called civilized areas of the world, people are living off soil that is demineralized, devitalized, and so badly depleted that man is now a creature beset by physical ills, bedeviled by mental maladjustments. Man has consistently taken from the earth and has not given in return. He has broken the spiritual law, which demands that he give in order to receive. I mean, that's so true. You think about the Dead Sea in the Middle East. The Dead Sea, well, why is it dead? I don't know if many people know this, but the Dead Sea, water flows into it, but it doesn't have an outlet. So it's receiving, but it's not giving, so it's called the Dead Sea. It's interesting. He has broken the spiritual law, which demands that he give in order to receive. Man, who should walk the earth like a king and be custodian of all he surveys, has degraded himself to the point where he is merely the despoiler of nature. Nature, following the inexorable laws of life, takes her toll of man. The vast majority of people are sadly lacking in mineral elements and vitamins. In short, they are suffering from malnutrition, which is just amazing. I mean, this guy's talking about the United States of America, and he wrote this. Well, this book was published in 1976. Not for sure what he exactly, wrote it, but it's just amazing back then. And just think nowadays. Dr. C.W. Kavanaugh of Cornell University has stated that there is only one major disease, and that is malnutrition. All elements and afflictions to which we may fall heir are traceable to this major cause. So yeah, it not only goes to the way we're growing our food, but also how we prepare our food. Amazing. Let me see what else here might be interesting before we move on. Okay, let's continue here. I think this gets back what I was talking about earlier, about the importance of having the right type of soil that has the earthworms, the bacteria, etc. that are constantly, it's basically alive with organisms. It is necessary not only to supply all the needed minerals to the soil, but it is important to have the right bacteria. And so I go back to my grandmother's garden. Well, she had my grandfather go out and catch fish. He would bring them back, and they would put the fish all over the garden, and then they would make that part of the topsoil. And every year, by putting the fish and allowing the fish to be part of what I would call compost, it was remineralizing the soil. And because she wasn't using synthetic chemicals, it was full of earthworms and bacteria, which were it was a live soil. Let's continue. It is necessary not only to supply all the needed minerals to the soil, but it is important to have the right bacteria. Without them, we cannot grow the proper plant life. These bacteria supply the electrochemical and catalytic energy to give impetus to the life and growth of the plant. Whew, that's a lot of words there. The organic material which we add to the soil, such as cottonseed meal, furnishes food for bacteria. Oh, that's interesting. As well as adding organic nitrates to the soil. Bacteria render inorganic mineral elements in the soil available to the plants, which then transform them electrochemically into organic minerals. I believe the day will come when we will recognize that it is the electrical energy of the plant that has the greatest effect within the human body. God manipulates electrical energies and atoms and many things that we know nothing of, things which are beyond the reach and the conception of man. I mean, there's a lot in just that one paragraph I just read. You know, one thing that popped out to me, I remember seeing on YouTube one time, this person had taken, I think, I'm not going to name a brand, but it was, let's just say it was cornflakes. They took cornflakes and crushed them up. And these cornflakes had been, on the package it said that they were fortified with iron and who knows what else. And so they took a magnet, put the magnet in the crushed cornflakes. They came out and there was filings on it, iron filings on the magnet. And I'm thinking, oh my. I mean, this ties in right this, our body cannot recognize that type of iron in that form. And so I think we should read this again. Bacteria render inorganic mineral elements in the soil available to plants, which then transform them electrochemically into organic minerals. Organic minerals. I'm not talking about, you know, the organic farming practices. This is a type of form of the minerals in a form that our body then can assimilate. I believe the day will come when we will recognize that it is the electrical energy of the plant that is the greatest effect within the human body. God manipulates electrical energies and atoms and many things that we know nothing of, things which are beyond the reach and the conception of man. I mean, it's just amazing. This goes on to Dr. Emoto's whole studies. Dr. Emoto's passed away, but he was from Japan, and his studies about how words and sounds, the impact that they have on water. You can look at the research. It's just amazing. Everything is connected. Earthworms will not live in just any kind of soil. It must contain a proper balance of organic minerals and humus before they will live and thrive. Goes back to the story of the farm I grew up on with my grandmother. They had the perfect soil for their garden. They were putting, they were revitalizing it with minerals because they were putting fish on, creating compost and revitalizing the topsoil year by year. And so the earthworms just love that. There is much work to consider in standardizing our soils and maintaining the standards set by nature. In good soil, worms appear all over the land after a rain. Without them, we cannot have the proper topsoil. Along the banks of the Nile, where the river overflows and throws its excess minerals into huge fields, worm gardening takes place naturally and plant growth is luxuriant. If we put all these methods together, a means should thereby be provided for developing a soil standard and mineral-rich foods that would benefit all mankind. Many of the fertilizers we use today are not available to the plant. For instance, of the rock phosphates that are added to the soil, probably only 1/10 of this phosphate actually gets to the roots of the plants where it is so needed. There are many people who have complained that in spite of their soil having all the minerals, it still would not grow anything. Such soil is in need of humus and the proper bacterial activity. Organic matter is the most important of all in soil fertilization. How so true. And I even come back about using all the phosphates, all the synthetic fertilizers, where I go back in my hometown in Gillsburg, Colorado. When I graduated from college, I remember going out to see my parents. I graduated, and I said, you know what, Dad, one thing I really miss is we used to go out to the pasture and we would have the windmill there, and we would get some well water. You know, the windmill was going around, it was pumping water. I missed that fresh water. And so we went out there, and I took a cup, I drank some, and I spit it out. And I go, what's happened to the water? And he said, oh, it's because of all the, the fertilizers we're using. It seeped down into the aquifers near our groundwater now. And yeah, and, the government says that it's at dangerous levels, but I don't listen to that. And even the town that our family lives near, the government required that they set up a water filter purifier for the entire town to filter out, because the nitrates and the phosphates were at dangerous levels. And so it's just amazing how all this is snowballing. Not only is our food deficient, but now we're ruining our drinking water. It's interesting times we live in. While I was in London in 1948, there was considerable talk of how aluminum sulfate was causing a great deal of cancer when used as a fertilizer. We are wondering whether or not an excess of this chemical in its raw state will become an irritant when brought to the plant life itself. Certainly it is far from the natural way of remineralizing the soil. I find from some of my own experiments that plants properly fed and grown in colloidal soil from Death Valley grew tremendously and were of an entirely different color from those grown in our local depleted soil. Some persons say that constructive living in three-way or three-pointed, as in a triangle, comprising good health, joy, or happiness, and use, proper use of all that we know. With these conditions obtaining, we will grow and develop in our chosen art. The ingrown quality of the foods we eat is a major controlling factor, not only of our bodily health, but also of the thoughts we think and even of our spiritual growth. I'm going to read that paragraph again. This is important. Some persons say that constructive living is a three-way or three-pointed, as in a triangle, comprising of good health, joy or happiness, and use, proper use of all that we know. With these conditions obtaining, we will grow and develop in our chosen art. The ingrown quality of the foods we eat is a major controlling factor, not only of our bodily health, but also of the thoughts we think and even of our spiritual growth. Because it is so important that we make the right use of our knowledge, it becomes imperative that we be very careful how we manipulate and mineralize our soil. We may mineralize the soil for alfalfa and find that while it works very well for alfalfa, it will not produce corn because it contains too much boron. So we can easily see the importance of obtaining the correct information about a standard for soil for all plant life. We must not go overboard and indiscriminately add chemical and mineral elements to the topsoil. If we add too much, the soil may become unbalanced and toxic to plants. When using the method of mineralization developed by Albert Carter Savage, it takes 5 years to complete the job. Woo, 5 years. But after the soil has once been brought up to a complete standard, it is easy to maintain it. The many different patterns in snowflakes are due to the electrical charges in the atmosphere. There is electrical activity going on in the human body that is either plus or minus, depending upon whether the condition is one of health or disease. The activities of the sun, moon, etc. influence the earth. We know this. For instance, the moon, we know that we have high tide and low tide in the oceans. The activities of the sun, moon, etc. influence the earth. The sun's rays are carriers of the sodium element and affect the sodium activity of the plant life of this earth. Without the sodium effects of the sun to react directly on our plant life, we would not get plant maturity or the sweetness of many of our fruits. That sweetness we have in the plant is due to the sodium element. And the reasons many people today are suffering from lack of sodium is that many of our fruits have not been allowed to ripen, but rather have been picked weeks before they matured so they would not spoil en route to the ultimate consumer. There is much that could be said about the effects of cosmic rays on our plant life. Dr. George Starr White has worked out many experiments showing that by connecting plants to the soil by copper tubing and copper wire, healthier plant life can be produced. Plants that are separated from contact with the earth do not have the proper coloring and do not grow to maturity. But when connection with the earth is reestablished, they progress to maturity. I think this is important because this leads to, I remember in the organic industry, it's like, oh, should hydroponics be included in organic? And I'm like, oh no, here we go with the watering down of the organic standards. Organic and hydroponics, I tell you what, hydroponics, you're talking about devitalized plants. Yeah, it may look beautiful, it may look like it's healthy, but you eat it and it doesn't have, then again, those organic elements that we need for maintaining our health, those minerals and vitamins we need. Dr. George Starr White has worked out many experiments showing that by connecting plants to the soil by copper tubing and copper wire, healthier plant life can be produced. Interesting. Spray materials have been found to be injurious, not only to insects, but all animals and birds that kill insects. These birds and animals are not harmful to our orchards and plant life. Yet whole colonies of bees have been destroyed when disinfectants and sprays have been used. DDT kills bees. Some birds can eat as much as 30 pounds of caterpillars and insects a day, which is to the farmer's benefit. But this will not be done if he continues the use of insecticides and sprays. We hear a great deal about the cover crop. It has been recommended that the cover crop be disked back into the soil at least once a year. Soybeans are especially suitable for this purpose, but they require considerable time for growth. It also has been suggested that turnips, kale, and rape be used. Rapeseed, that's canola oil. Any of our leafy plant life is good. Persons attempting to mineralize the soil properly should have soil analysis. And then he goes on here. It's getting, he's getting into details, and I think this is all great about soil rejuvenation. We come back to that. The cycles keep on turning. Regenerative agriculture has become the new word to say, and I just hope it takes roots and is here to stay, and not constantly having man keep on making the same mistakes over and over. When we stop and think that 97% of the money spent in the healing art is spent after ailments have begun, I think it is well to realize that more time and money should be spent on the prevention of disease. In order to prevent disease, we must start with the soil. The doctor of the future will be the doctor of the soil, the person who knows the mineral balance which will produce life more abundant. To the children of the future, we owe the inheritance of good soil. As we have stated above, poor soil produces poor plants and animals, and in turn, poor human beings. And what we want is a return to naturally fertile soil, which produces vital foods and normal, healthy bodies. Much knowledge and information is now coming to the front for our best good and for that of future generations. We should work unselfishly in carrying out our part in the great program for man's higher good. But if we continue living ignorantly on the coffee and the donut type of diet, all our soil rehabilitation cannot save us. It is well that we consider the remineralization program all the way from the soil to the tables. That ends the first chapter. I mean, this is just packed. And it's amazing what he was saying in the past, same today. Same issues. We do have more knowledge nowadays, but still we're still grappling with the same issues, particularly with the industrial complex that we have that's taken over our farming and plant production in the U.S. Well, that concludes today's talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to the next chapters.